If we take a look at our list of fields, we'll see that we still need to implement clip ID, expires, and posted. We'll do clip ID at the very end. Now we'll work on expires and posted. And then we'll have the time that the clip expires, if it does, and then the time that the clip was posted. Both of these deal with time, so we'll want to create a separate type specifically with time, and then we can wrap our time type when we have our expires and posted fields. So before we can move into those fields, we'll need to create our time type. To do so, we're going to create a new module in our domain folder. So right-click on domain, click on new file, and we'll just call it time.rs. So this will be our time module. We'll also want to double-click on our mod.rs directly above our time module, so we can add the time module to the tree. So we'll just do pub mod time, and that'll make the mod time module available to everything else. We can close that. And I'm also going to close the Explorer. We'll start out with our using statements. We already have chrono included in our cargo.toml file when we created our error enumeration. So we're going to be using chrono within this module. And we'll need to use the datetime structure, the naive datetime, and the UTC structures. The datetime is the ultimate structure that holds the date. UTC is the time zone we'll be using. We won't be using any local time zones. We'll just do everything in UTC time. And naive datetime will be the time that we store in the database. We'll also use the from macro from derive more. We use our typical SERDI with serialize, deserialize. And we'll also use from stir from the standard library. Now we'll create our time structure. So we'll make a public structure. We'll just name it time. That's going to wrap a date time in the UTC time zone. We'll then make some derives. So we'll derive clone, debug, from, deserialize, and serialize. I'm sure you've noticed by now, we have been making lots of new types. So we have our time, and that has a date time, and all of our fields are new types as well. Using a lot of new types is something that I would recommend if you're going to be writing a large program. What this will allow you to do is, if for example in the future, you want to upgrade Chrono to a new version, but the API breaks, if you were to use the datetime UTC across your code, then you would need to change everything in your code across the entire code base if there was some kind of breaking change due to the upgrade. However, since we're wrapping it in time, we only need to change the functionality within this time structure itself, and the entire code base will still compile without issues. Using new types also allows us to easily implement traits on this particular structure. We're not able to implement traits directly on this type because it's part of a different crate. However, our time structure is part of our crate, so we're able to easily do implementations with traits. For our implementation, we're going to have an into inner, and we're also going to have a timestamp function. What timestamp will do is return the number of seconds within this particular datetime. And that function is provided by Chrono itself, and we're just forwarding it within our time structure. We also want a function that converts between different times. So we have from naive, UTC. We're going to take a datetime. We'll return a self with that. And we'll just make a new time structure. Remember that we're going to only be working with UTC times within our database and our program. So there's no local time conversions. So we're just going to take a naive date time, which could be for any time zone, and we're just going to force it to be a UTC by passing it to this from UTC function. We'll also want to implement from stir on the time type. So recall that since we are working with a web application, we're going to have lots of strings coming directly from users. So we'll need to convert strings into times in order to get proper times. The error that's returned from Chrono, if it fails to parse, is a Chrono parse error. So we'll just use the from stir function. Return the results. So this function here, what we're doing is we're first creating a new string using the format function. We're taking this, which will be the date, which comes in from like a database or the web front end, and we're adding this t, a time segment, and a Z. This segment right here is the year, month, day, and it needs to be in the format of 4 digits year, 2-digit month, and then 2-digit day. We then append a T along with a time, which is just midnight, and a Z. So the Z separates the date and the time, and the Z indicates that this is a UTC time zone time. We then call the parse function and just parse it into a datetime UTC. You'll see that we're using the turbofish here to specify that we do want this exact type. This parse function is provided by the chrono library, and it's going to parse this string into the structure that we want. If it's successful, we'll get our new time structure, and we can just return it. We can use into because we have a from implementation at the top. So we are going from our from implementation automatically. We go from a date time into a time structure. So we can just call into. And then if we get an error, we'll just pass on the error. And that error will be a chrono parse error. That means that the date that we got is invalid. We've now created a time module within our domain module, and we can utilize this time module throughout the entire code base. And it's always going to convert a date like this into a date time structure. This means that no matter what, the date has to be this format, and that'll apply to the entire code base. We won't have any weird situations where some fields take certain types of date formats and others take other types. It always has to be in this format because this is the only location where this conversion is allowed to happen. Now that we've created this time structure, we'll be able to implement the fields in our clip structure that are related to time.